Hello, we're having a very interesting conversation today. We're going to cover a lot of topics. We're going to cover neuroscience, we're going to cover manifestation, we're going to cover what else was I going to talk about? Ableism, we're going to cover sexism. It's going to be a really loaded conversation, all stemming from my notes app. I'm going to show you guys my notes app, or a particular section of my notes app called Brain Thoughts. I started keeping this tab in my notes app when I was in a really deeply mentally ill place about 3 years ago now. I was really, really sick. I was in my last year at university and I was writing my undergraduate thesis on dissociative disorders. And I was not studying neuroscience, I was studying comparative literature. But I was really sick and I was having to navigate this really intense sickness that was going on inside, and I was just observing and observing, trying to crawl my way out and trying to figure it out so that I could get out, which is a complicated thing to do. It's not very successful if you are sick and you are trying to think your way out of your mental illness. It's not worth it. I don't think that the thinking out of it got me out of it. I think it just took time and rest and healing. You will stress yourself out too much trying to think your way out of your mental illness. But in a lot of ways, it was an exercise that for me, in being observant and just taking notes on what was going on internally. I also started to meditate more around that time, so I was very observant about what was going on in my head, and I was taking notes. Now, back when I was writing those notes, again, I was not thinking about neuroscience. I wasn't being like, oh, I'm going to be a neuroscientist one day. Now I'm working on this really heavy, intense personal project about neuroscience, but back then I was not. I was just mentally ill, interested in psychology. I only just then started to think, I think I would be really interested in psychology, so that's why I started writing that paper. But back then I would write these things and I knew that I was really sick. I knew that I was struggling with a lot of difficult mental health symptoms. I was struggling with these sort of internal, mental compulsions, physical compulsions, and all sorts of difficulties stemming from my trauma. I went through a really heavily traumatic period in my life, and I was just having changes in symptoms as I went along, and I was processing. So anyways, I knew that I was really mentally ill, and I also knew that I was really interested in psychology. But as I was writing these thoughts down, I would be like, they were really sort of these deep observations of my mind, but I was not really meeting them with very much respect. I was like, I'll keep them in a notes app because they're interesting, but because I knew I was so sick, I would look at them and be like, this is probably the kind of thing, this is my internalized ableism towards myself, but I was like, this is the kind of thing that crazy people write, and they think it sounds really smart because they're crazy, and then they look back at it later and they realize that they sounded like, psychotic, mentally ill, something like that. That's what I was thinking with these thoughts. I was like, these aren't really worth much, and they aren't that, they're probably just really distorted sort of thoughts from my mind that are just, you know what I mean? How sometimes you're out and about. This is really complex. I have a lot that I want to write about my experience as a mentally ill person, the internalized ableism that you start to develop towards yourself, and that's gonna also I'm gonna wrap that into the conversation. But back then I was like, how you go out sometimes and you see things that I love. This is my favorite thing in the world. When I see those things, they are not worthless to me. I love to stand there and read the things that people who obviously were living on the streets and developed psychosis are writing on the wall. They'll be writing these sorts of poems, recountings, and these sorts of I remember I stopped and watched one that was near my school, and it was this free association sort of thing that someone had written. It was like, Apple, awesome, New Jersey, nobody. It was just this sort of word jumble. And I like to honestly, stand there honestly and look at them and just be like, wonder what was going on inside. For me, it's interesting as a psychologist or someone going into psychology. I like seeing those things, and I'm always just stopping to read or to reflect. And I try to be very respectful, but I used to live in New York, and there's a lot of these are all, I've had so many thoughts on mental illness throughout my time and also observing, and these are all things that are going to go into my book that I'm not that deep into it, but I've already been thinking heavily over the last few years about what I'd want this book to be. I like to listen when people are obviously having a bit of, there's a lot of homeless people who are clearly in the midst of a really deep psychotic episode, or really, or probably a lot of them probably drug induced psychotic episodes. And I like to take the time to try to internalize what it is that they're talking about, what are they saying, and just to think about why are they expressing themselves like that, why are they reflecting, what are they reflecting back about their mind and the process that they're having. So, but anyways, these thoughts are probably going to wrap their way into my presentation that I'm about to show you. But anyways, I would look at these things that I was writing and I was like, these are probably sounding like those kinds of things that I read on the wall, or things that are just sort of like, what are you even talking about? And I'm so deeply mentally ill that I can't realize it. But as I started to get better and I started to read about neuroscience, the things that I wrote, I've started to find them all in neuroscience. um, in the sense that I saw that the ideas that I was having, because I wasn't just pulling from nowhere, I was making observations about my mentally ill mind. And I started to see those things in neuroscience books I was reading. And as I've been reading, I actually found another one today that I was reading. I was like, I wrote this in my notes app. So I'm going to show you guys everything that not everything, I'm going to show you guys some key things that I've written in my notes app over the last few years that I just wrote down thinking this is probably stupid, or, this is probably just me being a crazy girl who thinks she's smart. And then just being like, whoa, someone actually said this and published a book on it. Somebody wrote research on it. Um, and yeah, that's been a very interesting experience for me. And it's had me unpacking a lot of my own internalized misogyny. It's had me unpacking my own internalized ableism and just the way that I discredited myself over and over again and just told myself, like, you're crazy. Women, we get told we're crazy so much. So I was just like, you're crazy, you're mentally ill, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm going to show you guys some of the things that I wrote. And you know what? Before we go in, some of these might still sound a little bit kooky, but I think it's because I was trying to explain things about what was going on inside that I didn't have the scientific language for yet. I just was able to sort of put it down on paper in whatever way that I could. So sometimes I think they sound a little bit like, what is this? But yeah, so I'm going to try to explain a little bit of them. If there's some of them that actually correlate with something I've read in a book or a concept, I'm going to try to put that side by side so that you can see it. And I've mainly right now been keeping my focus set on dissociation and dissociative disorders because that's my big area of interest. That was my personal life experience, was with dissociation, dissociative disorder sort of spectrum. But I am extremely interested in psychosis as an experience and schizophrenia and all these things. So you might see me start to make some sort of thoughts, collect thoughts on what I think psychosis is. I haven't studied enough yet to say, oh, this is what it is, but these are just also initial thoughts on that. And also, like I said, some of these thoughts are me just being extremely interested in the political experience of mental illness being mentally ill as a sort of marginalized identity. And again, these are all things that I want to write about in this book that I have envisioned, but yeah, and what it means to be mentally ill in a collective that's sort of determining what's normal and what's abnormal, and that's sort of the basis of how we treat each other. It's not a bad thing per se, but it's a complicated thing. So I'm gonna speak about some of these ideas. Okay, here we go. My PowerPoint made on Canva. I did not make this template, but I selected some of the ones that related to books or related to things I was working on. They always don't, of course, don't always match perfectly, but I just thought it was interesting that I was thinking about them. So here we go. Brain thoughts. This is nothing connected to it. This is just to show you this is my first few entries and just things that were like themes for me or circulating. So brain thoughts. How do our brains decide what is reality? That was like a big like thought process for me. Like, what is the mechanism that makes us decide, yes, this is reality, and no, this is not reality anymore? And yeah, that's a pretty big question. But anyways, this was like my first thoughts on dissociation. I want to circle back to this. I mean, I've been kind of spot on a lot of things I didn't expect to be. So I'm like, maybe this is still something, but it's like, is there an electrical capacity in our brain? And is there, does dissociation helps with that? Like there's too much activity going on. So then dissociation starts to like diminish the activity. That was like, I don't know, that was just a thought I had like this I started making these notes when back in 2022, I believe, or maybe like January 2023 or so. This one is kind of funny, but this one was like relate to me. Processing anxiety, the sorts of anxieties that emerge from the being's awareness of the fact that it is processing and all of the complex possibilities of its own processing. That's not a really serious one. That was just like a me thing. I don't know. That one's a bit hard to explain. Let me see if I can explain it better. This was just like me trying to explain my experience. Like I just feel like I was aware but then aware of like anxious about the fact that I was aware. Does that make sense? I don't know. Here we go. This is the one from today. So this is somebody I wrote back in 2023, being like, girl, I'm crazy. But anyways, when you experience trauma, your brain learns to produce the chemicals which create our experience in a state in which homeostasis was not possible. I was like, all of this is to create homeostasis. That was like my big idea that I had back then. It then reinforces that idea by overloading our system to the point in which our brain cannot go yes or no. Why was I saying that? Your brain learns to, this is kind of almost like I'm wordy for myself right now. Brain learns to produce the chemicals which create, oh, okay, sure. Key parts of the brain literally shut down in traumatic events. This is something I already knew. This is the part that creates narratives and memories and makes decisions and knows human knowledge, etc. Again, I knew all this. I didn't this was I learned actually, we're gonna go into it. I learned this at my trial against my rapist. That was the first time I actually got neuroscience knowledge and got interested. um it is only later, once that part of the brain can be properly accessed, that it will begin to understand itself, not through any reality of what exists in the present moment, but in responding to biochemical reaction. This is sounding so wordy. Sometimes I don't understand myself. I'm like, what was I even saying? This triggers me. This makes me think of this. The brain can once again understand the images and reactions of the body and say, no, this is not what we are experiencing. Found this out by telling myself today I will never experience this particular set of symptoms ever again, which is true because they change every day as a reaction to my day and the chemicals my body is releasing that day. I don't fully understand myself, to be honest. I must have been thinking, but the point of the thing is that I was thinking about how everything is to maintain a state of homeostasis within ourselves, right? Today, I read about neuromodulators. I just started reading about neuromodulators that are chemicals in our brain essentially there to help us maintain homeostasis. So, here from this text I read today, amazing text, neuromodulators, an essential part of survival. And in this text, it says to survive environmental stressors, an animal must transition between a range of internal states and behaviors to identify new set points at which its physiological process function optimally, thereby regaining homeostasis. It was saying that the point of all of these chemicals, all these neuromodulators, is to maintain us in a state of homeostasis. So it was talking about this worm. And basically, like, for example, if the worm was in a state of starvation, it would basically put out these chemicals to get the worm to go eat. Or if the worm, it was interesting. It was like, even if the worm was like stressed or something, it would release chemicals to get it to not be stressed so that it would eat. Things like that. So it was all to keep it in a state of homeostasis. Okay, so this one is a lot. We're gonna go into my notes first. It's the black and white one. So again, I didn't have the language for anything I was trying to talk about, so it sounds kind of like, I don't know, weird, but I'll explain how it relates to the text I'm showing. So, as your brain is correcting things and working through a jumble of stuff in your psyche, naturally it'll vividly come to the forefront, like with nightmares and anxiety dreams. Problem is that this is more disruptive in waking hours than in sleeping hours when there's nothing to get done. This is our main problem with psychotic symptoms. I think your symbols come to the forefront. Like my dream about having to kill an evil man. I had this, okay, I was writing all this because I had this insane dream and I was thinking about it. I had this really crazy nightmare. Like my dream about having to kill an evil man in a bunker, that's the kind of delusions I hear people with psychosis have. So what I was thinking about was the fact that a lot of the things, the sort of things that happen in my dreams and in my nightmares that seem like, oh, that was a crazy dream, are things that sometimes you get people with psychosis having similar sort of thought processes, but during the day. So, for example, I remember being in a train on the subway and hearing this guy who was clearly in the midst of a psychotic episode, and he was saying that he was like a secret, he was an FBI agent, and that he had been sort of, that he was being persecuted or that's something like that. It was something really intense and like sort of fictional sounding. And I was like, that's the kind of stuff happens in my dreams. Now, I recently read I wrote this in like 2023 or so, and then only this year, 2025, I read Surfing Uncertainty by Andy Clark. And I'm gonna see if I can pull up the little like, can I pull? Okay, there's no pointer. I don't know if you can see my little mouse thing. It says, so there are clearly many differences, both experiential and functional, between perception and processes. I don't know if I got the right spot, but there was a part in which he talks about this. So basically, that our minds, so basically, we are learning things all the time, and we have something called bottom up processing. So the sensations we have in our body. So our senses, me like touching my hand, whatever. And then we have top down processing. Top down processing is these sorts of sets of hypotheses and things that we make about the world that we have, like our ideas, our sort of understandings of the world. And what's happening during the day is, let's say I touch my hand, so I can feel my hand. My brain, before I've touched it, is already sort of assuming, like hypothesizing my hand, hypothesizing that this is my hand, that I'm going to touch my hand, that it's going to feel a certain way. And if I touch my hand and that hypothesis is right, which most of the time it is, then our brain just continues on, same. But if I touch it and it feels completely different, like let's say I touch my hand and all of a sudden it feels like goo, my brain's gonna be like, oh, that's crazy. And then I'm gonna learn, and like there's gonna be a sort of signal sending that no, my prediction was not right. And then you learn and you sort of, it's just a cue for you to sort of have some kind of action, it's things of that nature. So I don't know if this was the exact spot he talks about it, but he does talk about in a part about how dreaming is also, he mentioned something like this about how it's a continuation of that top down processing. But I actually was having a lot of thoughts in that time about how our reality is actually just what is that when we're dreaming, we're just going through what we think reality is, but we don't have anything to check us on reality. So we don't have anything to tell us like, no, that's wrong. So that's why I was like, I think that dreams are a lot of things that are predictions or things that we think about the world. Like, how dreams, psychologists love to analyze dreams, like psychoanalysts, because it's all of these sorts of hidden perceptions of the world that we have. Like, I don't know, like they're very symbolic, right? Like, I don't know, um all of a sudden your mom comes up and she's like an army general, and then like things like that, and like your psychoanalyst would be like, you have an overbearing mother that's coming up in your dream, right? So that's what I was thinking about back then, and then I read about this and I was like, that makes sense, because it's your top down processing sort of still occurring, but without the bottom up processing to anchor you into whether that's reality or not. That was my thought process back then. So it was pretty cool. He didn't say exactly this, but he said something along these lines or similar, like very adjacent in Surfing Uncertainty. So when I read that, I was like, that's cool. I said that. And then here's this one. So we make models of reality. This is also 2023. We make models of reality organized based off of stimuli. Brain corrects itself, sees the wrong thing, surprise. Oh, I misunderstood the stimuli. But second, that is reality. This is actually exactly what is said in the predictive processing model, literally like practically word for word. Um, Brain relies on solid model of stimuli on which to fall back on. But if you have a shifty model, self-correction feat is a difficult feat. Two realities, physical, emotional. Sometimes there's just me like freeform. Two landscapes. The incorrect reality can also be based on your perception of tendencies. The world is an assumption before. I can't believe I didn't even read that part. The world is an assumption before it is a reality. Now, down here, he says perception is controlled hallucination. So what do you see? Anyways, saw two. This is my example. Look, saw two guys I thought were hugging. This was the event that made me think all this. I saw two guys and I thought they were hugging. I was like, that's kind of weird that they're hugging. So then I was like, my reality corrected itself. So they genuinely even looked as if they were hugging in my mind's eye for a minute, not as a hallucination, but as an interpretation or a translation of the stimuli. How does our perception of what we think could be possible, I don't know why I said it like that, affect our visions, interpretations of the world? Now look at this example that Andy Clark uses. Um, In this way, animals like us may be saving. Okay, so in this way, animals like us may be saving valuable neural bandwidth by using what we already know to predict as much of the current sensory data as possible. When you seem almost to see your beloved cat or dog when the curtains start to move in just the right way, even if it was on occasion only the one that was responsible, you may have been using well trained prediction machinery to start to complete the perceptual sequence, saving on bandwidth and usually knowing your world better as a result. So he's saying basically that that does happen because our minds are always predicting what's occurring. So I that in the situation, you turn around. This happened to me the other day. I thought I saw my cat walking down the hallway. I turn around, you turn around, and the curtain is moving, and you think it's your cat, even though it's just the curtain moving. It's because your brain is like trained to basically have these little predictions set that most of the time are true, but sometimes they're not true. It can happen on occasion that you think something is basically something and it's not. So that one is pretty aligned with that's actually exactly aligned with what I was saying. So it was pretty cool to read that in a book. Of course, I didn't say it was anywhere near the level of technicality or anything as Andy Clark did. I mean, his book was phenomenal. I'm not even finished with it yet. It's so good. But yeah, but anyways, it was just like, oh whoa, like stuff that I was like seeing in my head. Okay, these are a little bit more, I don't agree with everything I said, but I think it's pretty cool how it's been leading me into the work that I'm doing right now. So I said time is a collective concept. When you dissociate, you can't keep up with the concept of time accurately. This one was directly related to my life experience because, oh my gosh, this was so bad for me when I first was going through like a period of traumatic sort of recollections. I started to dissociate really heavily, and there was times I would go out and I would start walking around. I was so lost in like a dissociative headspace that I actually missed. I was supposed to get COVID tests at that time, and you couldn't miss more than like two, and I'd be out and I'd be completely lost in my dissociation and not realize what time it was, and I'd get back and I've completely missed the time that I was supposed to get my COVID test. So this actually happened enough times that I got on academic probation back then because I was really going through the dissociation. So yeah, I was like, yeah, you cannot keep up with time. But anyways, just one example, when you have psychosis, you interpret sights and sounds that no one else in the I don't know why this is related, so I'm just gonna skip it, but I think I was trying to align it with another idea that was like I'm one of those kinds of people that speaks very fast, and I think that sometimes I am thinking faster than I can speak and faster than I can write. So that's why some of these are like, what are you even talking about? Because I was just like, I was trying to write faster than I could speak or think. Or no, I was thinking faster than I could write. But anyways, and then I don't actually agree with what I said here 100% now that I've read more, but I'm just gonna say it. I'm just gonna read it here. So the only thing that is now. I mean, that's kind of true. Time is a concept created by us. I don't 100% agree with that now that I've read the neuroscience, but like I guess we do experience time in a neurological way. But anyways, existing only through language to provide sense to our well, actually, now that I remember how I thought about it, I guess I kind of agree. Anyways, only through language to provide sense to our complicated brain-body interaction. The future is only a sense of desire structured in the form of language. When I have money, I will go to the store. I have a current desire for both money, which I do not see in my current experience, and for a trip to the store, which I do not see in my general vicinity. I will devise a means through which to attain both those things in my experience. Okay, I don't know. And yet you will never encounter the supposed future. Okay, so the future doesn't exist. This was also just me having like really conceptual thoughts about the world. Future is not real. It's all just a desire, right? And the past is also not real. It's just in our minds at this point. It's not real. Okay. Um, you will never, and yet you will only encounter the moment in which you happen to attain those two things. The past is a more complicated process. As you experience, your body is reacting in minute chemical ways to each state of being, and you can never experience identical things twice. Our conception of the past is only a reaction to your body telling your brain, I will now be releasing these chemicals based on what I know. Here's the reasoning in the form of a memory. Okay, actually, I agree with myself again. I didn't agree with myself. Now I agree with myself again. I was like, okay. Um, and then your brain responds by going yes, okay, or no, not accurate. At which point, your body will modify its way of being. That's also actually predictive proxima. moment by moment. All of these processes are the body's way of maintaining its ultimate goal, homeostasis, which I was talking about, another one, right? I said it again. Narrative in the form of past provides us a sense of homeostasis by providing us with some sense of control and predictability. I guess that's the point of episodic memory. Future is our way of achieving homeostasis by also giving us a sense of predictability and easing our survival need to fulfill our desires. So the present moment is the only real thing, and everything else is just our body's way of maintaining homeostasis. Our conception of the future, of the past, our ways of positioning ourselves, which actually this is, so we're going to go into that. Yeah, so future is our way of achieving homeostasis by also giving us a sense of predictability and easing our survival need to fulfill our desires. No, I do not see food in front of me now, but I can retain homeostasis by conceptualizing the food will once again be in front of me at some point. Okay. In reality, there's no certain or even very much truth to our idea of the future. Ah, horrible thought process for me who is extremely attached to I need the future to be good. We could go outside right now and a brick could fall on our heads and we could never see that food. But the conceptualization provides a sense of safety, which provides homeostasis. See, I didn't need to know all this, but me being upset that I perceive this, I was like, I don't want to know this. But, anyways, future is still important in the sense that most of it is very highly likely prediction based on our current experience, both biochemical and external. Again, the predictive processing model. So there's a few different ways in which this connects to things I read, but the main thing is the place cells. Because I read about place cells like like last year or something. No, not even last year, a few months ago. But yeah, so place cells are basically cells in our brain, and through connecting, I don't know, communicating through hippocampal sharp wave ripples, they basically tell you where you are and when you were there. So I mean, I guess that's connected in a sense, and maybe that those are thrown out. I mean, that's kind of the project I'm working on right now with the sharp wave ripples, not specifically related to place cells, but about the whole when you dissociate, you can't keep up with the concept of time accurately. It's highly connected to what I'm learning right now. So, anyways, so okay, next part here. As your brain is correcting things and working through a jumble of stuff in your psyche, naturally it'll vividly come to the forefront. Like with my, so actually I included this part again because it was important to me. Like with nightmares and anxiety dreams. Problem is that this is more disruptive in waking hours than in sleeping hours. This is highly connected to all the work that I'm doing. I know it's not out yet for anybody to read, but it's what I'm working on right now. This is our main problem with psychotic symptoms. I was thinking about mental health in general, that it's the disruptive part isn't even that it's happening, but that it's happening when we're awake and we're supposed to be doing all these different things. So, I think your symbols come to the forefront. Okay, so whatever, like we already read that one. But um yeah, so basically again, I was thinking a lot about time. The reason that I included this, first of all, this all of this relates again to other things I'm working on in my project. So basically, um I'm working on this something with hippocampal sharp wave ripples, and these ripples are basically responsible for memory replay and play and encoding. And I would this was one of the first texts I read about hippocampal sharp wave ripples, but basically that the the synchronization serves as a clocking mechanism to enable coordinated memory recall. So it goes back to the issue of timing, and if we're in the right, we can understand where we were, when we were, all of these things. So it's actually like highly connected to things that I'm working on now, which is just interesting because I wasn't like I wasn't thinking about neuroscience. I was just thinking about my mind. Um, and the other interesting thing that the reason I couldn't find the specific place where I read this, but basically I was talking here about how the problem with mental illness is that the symptoms are disrupting you in your waking hours. And it's interesting because I'm now basically working on a project about things or might be going off during waking hours because the hippocampal sharp wave ripples are thrown off. And because they're thrown off, things are consolidating partly in the day when they should be actually those things like our memories are supposed to encode during sleep, like non REM sleep and during rest. So they're encoding at the improper time. I know if you don't know anything about what I'm talking about, I didn't put anything on the screen, so it makes like if it sounds extremely confusing, I'm sorry. I wish I had found the part, but Yeah, so all this is actually relating to these things I was talking about, which is interesting. Almost done here. These are actually things that are just fitting my project right now. So they seem a little bit discombobulated. But yeah, so we have up here. So this is actually, I started reading, at this point, I started reading neuroscience books. So some of these are old thought processes, things I was talking about when I was writing my thesis about possession trance disorder. Some of these are more recent notes that, for example, this top one is a recent one. I'd already started to read Surfing Uncertainty by then. So prediction model. Predictions match oncoming signals. Maybe in dissociative identity disorder, the signals match different predictions. Maybe if we can't predict the memory, we can't remember it. I mean, that's pretty I mean, also that I also kind of read that in Michael Graziano's book, Rethinking Consciousness. He talks about he actually says this exact thing that if you can't put your attention on something, there's no way for you to express it. And both of these things actually they weren't specifically talking about dissociative identity disorder, but they had me thinking about dissociative identity disorder and dissociation. So yeah, and then this one is pretty interesting. I just wrote this like off like the cuff. I was just like, brain has switches that open and close. Now it's interesting because now I'm actually working on a project where I'm talking about a gating mechanism in the brain. So the neuromodulators can open or close the gates. So I guess the I was when I wrote this, I was like, what are you even saying? But the brain, I guess, does have switches that open and close in a way. So cool. And then if you can put your memories together, you can put everything into one cohesive self. If you can't, you can't. Okay. Here we go. So fear consumes this cortical processing. The trauma takes some importance, so it comes out in distorted forms. Overstimulation also distorts the cortical processing. This is actually true for many different reasons. I'm gonna skip the possession thing because that had to do with my thesis, kind of. So actually, so this is I was connecting this to something I read in the hippocampal sharpwave ripple text that I read. Um, so hippocampal sharpwave ripple, a cognitive biomarker for episodic memory and planning. So there's a line that says only when the suppressing effects of the subcortical modulators are removed can recurrent excitation in the CA3 recurrent. Oh, okay, whatever. Kind of a mouthful still for me. But anyways, basically, yeah. So when the suppression is lifted, then the memories can start to encode essentially. So again, that's going back to the brain has switches that open and close. So it's cool that I just like felt that. And then science of consciousness. So this was I wrote actually yeah, I wrote this last like 2023 probably. Or no, actually I think I read this as I was reading Michael Graziano's book. Dissociation is a less conscious experience, which some people actually do say that, so it's kind of cool. That's whatever make us conscious, revive us, and heal dissociation. So regaining consciousness as healing dissociation. It's funny because I read that, and then I actually, again, I did read that people say that dissociation is a limited consciousness, but some people don't agree with that. So this was when I was actually trying to fix up my undergraduate thesis that I didn't get to finish at that time. Um, okay, intrusions versus no intrusions, PTSD, cortical attention. This is what I'm actually writing about right now. So the hippocampal sharpwave ripples. And then I think curing symptoms like delusion. This was a bit interesting. I think curing symptoms like delusions and psychosis actually comes with relaxing the subconscious, making it less stormy. People who experience psychosis have a very confusing, non-delineated, and non-consensual relationship to their subconscious. So they're not choosing everything that's coming out of their mind. Like their things are just kind of appearing, I guess. Um, their subconscious blends into them and rules them. Uh, their brain conceptualizes this. I was thinking of like the kinds of things I would hear people saying on the street again. So people conceptualize this as like attacks by spirits. So the divine is possessing or attacking them. People who think like Satan is sort of attacking them, or I saw somebody writing this on a wall the other day on this this poster, and they were like, this on these days, it's like Satan, like these are the days of like uh some kind of satanic ritual. It's like Satan, all this stuff. I was like, okay. The divine is our subconscious. That had to do with it, but I'm not going to go all into it. So the collective is persecuting or abusing them. So it was like their subconscious mind is attacking them, but they were perceiving the attack as other things. it's a little bit not like put together. This was way back again in 2023, so it was like 2 years ago. Anyways, so things that I've read recently relating to so arousal provokes neuromodulators that suppress episodic memories. Actually, the idea that you need to relax your subconscious, I know it seemed a little, again, I didn't have the neuroscience language to explain this, but actually, what I'm reading now for my project is when you're in a state of arousal, these a lot of negative things happen when you're in a state of like hyper arousal. And I would argue that probably people who are going through sub like psychosis. I was on the train 2 days ago, no, yesterday, and there's this guy who was just he was deep in a I mean, he was like having an argument with nothing. I mean, he was clearly having a delusion or something, like a hallucination or something. He was really angry. That's what I kept noticing. I was like, he's really angry. Like, clearly, he's really upset. And it wasn't, I was listening, there wasn't like a cohesive storyline. He wasn't angry about a specific thing, but he was just really angry. And I was like, when you're angry, you're in that state of fight or flight, right? So, anyways, so arousal provokes neuromodulators that suppress the episodic memory. That's related to my work. So when you're in a state of arousal, these neuromodulators are making sure that you're not actually encoding episodic memory. That could be the case for some people who are dealing with trauma-induced psychosis, rather than schizophrenia. And then, so when the amygdala senses danger, it provokes fight, flight, or freeze. Um, and then because you're in fight, flight, or freeze, basically the prefrontal cortex, which is the rational part of your brain, gets inhibited. So you're not able to think rationally as much. Again, I don't know, I've not delved into psychosis as much as I want to yet because I just started and I'm really focused on dissociation right now. But these are just like initial thoughts and things that I thought related to the idea of relaxing the subconscious. And that's really related to my project and something that was going on in my own mind back then is that I realized that I needed to relax and get into states of rest to be able to encode my memories and to sit with what had happened. I think any trauma informed person can tell you that. And I know it's a bit different for psychosis, it's a different experience, but I think in general, the reason I connected this right now is just because I was like, oh, the whole idea of relaxing the subconscious was a really big thing for me. And now I've sort of been seeing that reflected back to me through the hippocampal sharp-wave ripple idea that I've been working on. So I think that's pretty cool. Again, I don't know if it necessarily relates to psychosis yet because I haven't learned enough, but I just thought the idea of relaxing the subconscious mind was something really crucial to me back then. And honestly, it could still have an effect for people with trauma-induced psychosis because this whole entire thing that I'm working on is trauma. I don't know how it would actually translate or if it would translate at all for people with actual schizophrenia. So I don't know that yet. And then just ending on kind of a fun note or just interesting note, this was me. I've been reading pleasure activism so slowly, it's crazy. But I feel like it's in line with the spirit of pleasure activism because I'm not forcing myself to read it and I'm not treating it like my job to read the book. I've just been enjoying reading the book and just reading it when it's pleasurable for me, you get me? So, but this was when I was reading a few months ago, and she talks here again, I think a lot about severe mental illness, particularly as the way people react to mentally ill people. I feel like mentally ill people are marginalized by society because of the way that their voice is excluded from the story and the way that people are treated, the way that we avoid helping them. And yeah, I have so many reasons why I think this. And I think that also being a woman and being mentally ill like contributed to the marginalization of my experience, my voice. So, anyways, so I really want to write about that. But I read this what a section a segment to include here. But anyways, but here, so I'll read what about for my community, for my people, what is pleasurable in finding a place of grace and well-being and transcending oppression? If we're not imagining where we're going, then it will constantly just be pushing back outside from inside of cages as opposed to imagining what's happening outside of cages. It's pretty interesting. I actually forgot to include this, but I wrote a lot about how when you're healing, I think it's very important. It's healed me so quickly to know what it would look like for me to be healed. How do I define a healed version of me? and how does that healed version of me operate rather than just going like just focusing on healing as an activity, but healing as a vision. And so that's been something that's actually was in my notes app a lot. And I thought first of all this was interesting and beautiful, but I also was thinking a lot about how mentally ill people, I think it's such a difficult experience, and it's so also it's work. It is work to heal, and it's work to feel like you have to navigate putting yourself into a socially acceptable sort of form for people. It's like hard work, and you feel like the pressure to be working on it. I felt pressure to be working on my mental illness all of the time and to an exhausting degree because I felt like I needed to be something for people and all these things. And yeah, anyways, so I also thought about how mentally ill people, we need to center pleasure more and we need to center enjoyment more in our experience by like a lot. And also take pleasure, like, there's so many parts of being mentally ill where it's like it's hard, you're gonna be mentally ill for a long time. I've gotten so much better, but honestly it's still really bad for me a lot, and it's something that I've learned to just like I have to embrace it, I have to live with it and find like the beauty in it, find the beauty in like being in a situation where maybe I need care, I need love, I need things like that, and it's okay. Like it doesn't, I think there's so much guilt that comes from being mentally ill, you get me? And um I don't know. I just think we deserve to just embrace ourselves and to find beauty in where we are and not feel like what we are is wrong and it's like our duty to fix it. You get me? I mean, it's part of it. We want to be better, but it's like it's this really laborious task to heal from mental illness. And I think that we also deserve pleasure as mentally ill people and to love ourselves and like who we are. I don't know. It's a bit, I want to expand on that thought more, but I was really inspired reading pleasure activism, and it's inspired me. It's one of my like it's inspired me so much, and as a woman, as a survivor, as a mentally ill person, all these things. It's a great book. I've mentioned it quite a few times, but anyways, last one. As for manifestation, the reason why it worked is because the future does not exist in any possible sense. When you tell your brain what it might see with some level of certainty, it will begin to tune into evidence and pathways to retain the homeostasis that was created from your narrative of the future. You will be specifically looking for those things, and you will likely find them at some point in our vast lifetimes. Yeah, just a little thought. I'm not even going to delve into it, but if you like it, you like it. I did think a lot about, yeah, again, a lot. I think a lot of my thoughts on manifestation and on healing for mental illness, because this has been intertwined for me. My manifestation journey has been interlinked with me healing, is having a vision for yourself and having a place that you want to go rather than just doing things to be better. It's more about what do I want to heal into and who do I want to be at the end of this. And I think that can be a really useful thought process that I think we don't always go into in therapy of like what does healing, what does being healed look like for you, or what does a better version of you look like? I think we save that for the self-help videos and stuff or self-help books and stuff, and it's like I think it's actually probably a really important mental process in therapy as well that we should be using more so that people can see their progress. And it's been so useful for me to see my progress in life so I feel better. And I think that it is useful to have a place that you're going. I think therapists often ask that in your first session, I guess, or things of that nature. Why do you want to do this therapy? Things like that. But I think it's just always good to have that little vision of yourself so that you can see it coming to life. So I'm gonna stop sharing. I guess my question for myself, well, I guess the reflection that I've been having now as I've gotten deeper into this project, and I've just been shocked, I guess, shocked over and over again that I've been able to manage it, that I've been able to understand everything, and it feels like it keeps growing in complexity, and yet I've been keeping up. And I don't say this to be like, oh my God, whatever. Like, I feel like I'm saying this because I'm like, I've been doing so much reflecting again on my own internalized misogyny, on my internalized ableism, that when I started to write these things, I didn't immediately think like, oh my God, I have a natural born gift or something like that. I mean, I did think I was like, these are pretty smart, like, but most of the time I'd look at them and I didn't go further with it. I didn't think like, oh my God, I need to be reading neuroscience books. I mean, I guess eventually I got myself there after some time, but it was I actually met all of my thoughts with a lot of shame and like a lot of anxiety, actually, which I know sounds strange, but I was like, wow, I'm so crazy. Like, this is just stuff that, like, again, this is all like internalized ableism and stuff, and I'm so crazy. This is just stuff that crazy people write, and like me thinking that I could possibly be smart or that I could possibly have an idea is just me being like cuckoo, like a little bit off. Has As I've found myself and found my voice through this project, I have gone deeper into the thought process of how when you get sick, and me being a woman contributes, but when you get sick, you get to a point where you really, it changes the way that you perceive yourself a lot. Like, you start seeing yourself in a really different light, particularly if you are dealing with a more severe mental illness or things that bring about more cognitive distortions that are I just think the further the cognitive distortions and things of that nature you deal with, the more negatively it can make you perceive yourself. And there's so much to unpack, but I started to gain a really distrustful relationship to myself and to the way that I communicated and the way that I moved through the world. I was really, because I took it so hard when I would have problems. Like, when I didn't see things the way that other people saw things, or when I had moments where my mental illness would lead me astray, I felt it really would impact my self-esteem a lot. And I started to develop such anxiety about everything that was coming out of my head. I started doubting everything. And actually, I'm a very intuitive person. So there was other things that I was doing really well. I was actually really developing a strong relationship to my intuition at that time in other ways. So for example, I started to read tarot cards for people. I know this is a very silly version, but I did start to read tarot cards for people, and I was really spot on. Like, I would tell people, I would predict people's relationships for them, and they would work out really well. I would meet strangers. To this day, I'll meet strangers, I'll give them a tarot reading, and I'm like crazy spot on. Like, I met this girl that I'd never met before. It was like a party trick for me. I still, like, I don't read tarot much any, like, recently, because I just haven't been around people, but it's kind of like a fun party trick for me. Like, I met this girl I'd never met before, and I read her tarot cards, and I started picking up so much information. I was like, your parents are divorced. She was like, yeah. I was like, you're like, it was like, also, I don't remember exactly, but it was something along the lines like, you have brothers, your parents are divorced, you're really struggling because you want to speak to your dad more, you haven't spoke to him as much since the divorce. And she was like, yeah, like, yeah. I was like, oh, it's crazy. And for example, when I was volunteering at the hostel that I was volunteering at, I had one day that I read tarot cards for a lot of different people. I had like one friend at the hostel who wanted me to read them, and then people saw that I had them out, and everyone, this is how it goes. All of a sudden, everyone wants a tarot reading, and you're doing like 10, and it's like, okay. But I started reading tarot for this boy who I literally had zero connection with. I'd met him that day. He was just like a person at the hostel, and I started reading his tarot cards, and I was like crazy. I was like, you're here because you had a roommate, and you and your roommate had a falling out. Like, there was something crazy that happened. And he was like, I was like, this is wrong, right? He was like, no, this, like, keep going. This is right. I was like, so you and your roommate, like, you had this big falling out. So now you don't have a place to stay, which is why you were here. And you've really been struggling. You don't want to ask for help. I was like, and then it was like a past, present, future. I was like, in the future, I was like, you should go back to see your family. Like, you should not feel ashamed. Like, don't worry, go back and see your family, and you're gonna, like, get back on your feet, and you'll probably make friends there, and you'll meet people who are gonna be very important to you, and, like, they'll take care of you because you really want and need someone to take care of you. I was like, I determined so much about it. I was like, the falling out was really difficult. Like, it was very mentally difficult for you and things like that. And he was like, yeah. And I could tell he felt really relieved, like, at the end. It was a really cool experience. I love reading tarot for people, but anyways, but I was reading tarot cards and stuff like that, and I was really spot on. People always wanted me to read tarot cards. And again, I think there's this gendered gap for me, where in that context, I could see myself as a really intuitive person and be like, wow, this is really cool. But I didn't see myself as very intelligent per se. I saw myself, I was really struggling with my mental health. First of all, I think I was kind of in the wrong field. Like, I was good. I made good grades. I was good at comparative literature and good at literature and stuff like that. I was fine, but I think I wasn't even flourishing as much as I wanted to, because I think I was really probably in the wrong place, first of all. Even though I still made good grades, but I felt like I wasn't feeling like, oh my gosh, this is really it for me. But I think I didn't see myself as particularly I was like, I know I was smart, but I didn't think I was like very smart. Like I was just like medium smart. And I don't know, I just think that I didn't also, for example, I feel like everything that I was doing was in the realm of like a woman. You know what I mean? Like, I know this is sounding strange, but it's like, it's kind of gendered. Like, I feel like the humanities is like an appropriate woman field. And I think that also reading tarot cards was kind of a girl thing. So it was kind of just, I didn't see those things as examples of intelligence, because I was just seeing myself as like, these are still girl things to do. And because they're girl things to do, they're not indicative of me being a very smart or perceptive person. They're just indicative of me having like a party trick or, you know, things like that. And as I started to write these ideas down about my brain and stuff, I actually felt really shameful and like shame towards myself, and almost like a repulsion of like, this is weird. Like, why are you doing this? This doesn't really make sense. And like, why would you think that this could be something for you? And like, why do you think that you could get there? And I was just more, particularly because I was so mentally ill at that point, I just was seeing myself as like, you're crazy, or like, you're weird, and you know, things like that. And I would never have imagined myself to pivot the way that I did. And that was pretty insane for me. And it was really, I think it felt like such a relief to have like real language for what I was observing within myself, and seeing myself really click into a framework of existing ideas and thoughts and things, and just being like, whoa, I'm in the right spot out of the blue. And everything feels so easy. Like, I think it's felt so easy for me, and I've just been shocked at like the ease at which I just was like, click. And yeah, I don't know, that was pretty strange, I think, for me. But going back to the mental illness thing, I think that I have this big idea that I really want. Again, this is going into things I want to write, but when you start to get mentally ill, people stop seeing you as a very worthy co-creator of reality, and they start to meet you with this level of skepticism, and you start to meet yourself also with skepticism, and this sort of, I've just felt this constant paranoia towards myself about what are you doing? Is this okay? Like, am I okay? And is what I'm doing okay? And I would get really down on myself and just have really low self-esteem about everything I thought and everything I did. And I think it's sad, because I think that actually, just because I think sometimes because I was mentally ill, when you're mentally ill, you start to make different jumps and you start to make different connections. And because they're not necessarily within the norm of what everybody else is approving of, people start to, I think everything you do starts to get a little bit discredited. And also, maybe people don't understand 100% where you're coming from all the time. So they sort of meet you with this feeling of like you're weird, or like they're kind of disturbed by you and disturbed by the thoughts that you have and things of that nature. I don't even think it was so bad for me. I think I felt that towards myself, so I just hid myself away. But I think that I definitely see that with other mentally ill people. But yeah, people with severe mental illness, I think the worse it gets, the worse you get the sort of reaction from people. And I think people start losing out on the really intelligent things that you're saying. What I see a lot, and I know that psychosis is a really complicated, and schizophrenia and stuff is a really complicated experience, and it's like, yeah, there's so many layers to it. But I will say, I mean, I think a lot of it doesn't mean that people with those disorders are not intelligent or not worthy of contributing, of joining the conversation. And that's why I think it's so important also to get people with mental illness, severe mental illness, into the picture, into the conversation in all levels of the world, and in science, in government, and all these things. Just because people have a mental illness does not mean that they are not worthy of contributing, that they're not going to have extremely intelligent points, that they're not going to have their own interesting view of the world. I think in some ways, because I was mentally ill, I saw my worth as lower. I didn't see myself as worthy sometimes of joining the conversation or saying my thoughts. But at the same time, I think that because I was already disconnected from the norm, I was within myself more open to making abnormal connections that didn't seem like they made sense in my life per se. Like it didn't make sense for me to be a neuroscientist or to be observing my mind the way that I was, and yet it I was okay with it because I was like, well, I'm just crazy anyways. Might as well put it in my notes app, right? And so I think that there's all these different dynamics and layers, and when you start to be mentally ill, people meet you with so much. I think people meet you with this sort of like tension and anxiety, and it can be really hard because you still have so much to contribute and you still have so much to say. It doesn't mean you're stupider. It doesn't mean you're worse. It doesn't mean you're bad. It just means that there's parts of you that you're going to have to learn to manage, and like what's harming me, what's works, what doesn't, and like sort of realign yourself and re-navigate yourself to be part of the conversation in a really productive and useful way. Again, these are all things that reading my book that's going to come out in who knows when one day. But yeah, I think like this is all part of things that I thought about as a mentally ill person, and just how people stop including you in the conversation, and they stop seeing, because they think your reality is not correct, they stop including you into the conversation about what our reality is. And all of us are actually, reality is what we decide together. And people, we're all of the tasks that we do all of the time are almost reality creation tasks of for example, lawmaking. What's our collective reality going to be in the country? Things of that nature. And when you're mentally ill, people stop seeing you as somebody worthy of creating that reality with them. And so then our reality is sort of like, that's not good, and just like, get it out of here. It's weird. It's creepy. We don't want to see it. And there's so much worth and beauty and value. I know a lot of people who are mentally ill who are like amazing artists. It can be such a window into like the mind, into the human condition, to be mentally ill. And there's so much like worth and value to the experience of being outside of the norm as well. And I think that goes for any kind of marginalized identity, but particularly I think there's something specific to mental illness, in that we are literally like, okay, your reality is like not healthy, or not sort of okay. And I think that you get that effect. And again, go read my book. That's not even going to be out for who knows how long. But I mean, obviously these things are worsened and worsened as you have other marginalized identities. I think so many of the people that I saw experiencing active psychosis in the streets of New York were Black, like, to be honest, and I thought had so much deep thinking processes about the difficulty of already having a marginalized identity, and then having this extra marginalization of people are already scared of you, don't want to see you, and now you're mentally ill, and they're just like, get out of here, and like, we don't want to. There's so much to unpack, honestly. And yeah, just there are our sort of sense of what is reality and who gets to contribute and who gets to sort of have their voice take part in this reality creation that we're all doing together. It's just, yeah, I thought about that a lot. And anyways, but yeah, I think that those were things that really stopped me from seeing how smart I was. And then this is a little bit more of a kooky point, but I think that this is a bit silly, but I also got into manifestation around the same time, and I don't see manifestation as like this like magic woo-woo thing, crystals and all this stuff. Like, I don't see it as like the universe giving you magic or something. I think I have a very like neuroscience sort of psychology relationship to the concept of manifestation, which is, if you don't know what manifestation is, it's just the idea that our subconscious mind creates our reality. I've been reading in the neuroscience books that I'm reading just in different terminology, you get me? But and I think that's why I actually connect a lot of neuroscience to manifestation and all this stuff. So, but anyway, so I do think it's true across many different levels. I think, for example, if we all believe that mentally ill people are crazy and they're not deserving of being in our society, then we create environments where people are consistently made sicker and sicker by not being allowed to contribute. And that's one collective subconscious idea that we have, or if we all think girls are not that smart and we don't let girls into programs, we don't give girls a chance to prove that they're smart, right? So anyway, so those are ways that which we collectively manifest all of the time. But I think, again, I've been shocked about how easily I've managed this project and how easily I've managed reading things that I didn't see myself as being connected to at all. I've been like, oh my God, like, is it because I'm manifesting it and all this stuff? I'm like, I feel like guilty. I'm like, maybe it's not because I'm smart. Maybe I've like really tapped into something. I know that sounds insane. And, but it's like, I feel like that's kind of a silly thought process, but at the same time, like, I think it's been also me just constantly being like, how on earth could you be so smart because you're a girl? Like, you're not gonna be smart at this. And always having some external sort of thing to sort of credit. And it's like, when I look back at my notes app, I'm like, I was literally saying all this before I was doing any kind of like, oh, I'm manifesting. Like, I'm a smart person, right? And I think that a lot of manifestation is not actually manifestation is not the universe just giving you something, but it's also, I personally think, just a deep intuition about what you're capable of and a deep intuition about what kind of experiences you could see in your life, and then you making yourself open to those experiences coming into your life. I think it's our subconscious mind guiding us and being like, I decided to manifest me being able to put this idea down into a research project because I had the deep sensation that I could do it, that I was capable, that I would be able to finish this, and I would be able to, and also the deep sort of sensation that me going along this path would be something that would make me more aware of myself, make me grow, like all of these different things that I think it's just a subconscious hit. And we have such a deep awareness in our own ways of all of the things I think we are capable of, that, it's just the subconscious knowing about who we are. And I don't see that. I think that I believe in magic in the sense that I think the universe and the world and our minds are bigger than we give them credit for. And because of that, I engage in things that people might seem as a little bit like, see as, oh, it's magic, it's silly, it's, stuff like that. But I believe in it because I've seen it at work in my own life, and I've seen manifestation at work in my own life. But I think it's neuroscience as well, and just my intuition about myself, and I should follow these callings that I have about myself that surprised me. Like, I was surprised to go down this path, but in hindsight, it made sense looking at the things I was doing before, And it's been cool to see how this project has actually aligned with things that I had in my notes app before I even thought I'm going to read a neuroscience. Before I read anything about neuroscience, I was just wanting to go down that path. And I guess intuitively that was something enjoyable for me, something that I found myself wanting to do in my daily life. And now I found like an avenue. And now, because I'm jumping back and forth, I wish that I could see more mentally ill people given. Sometimes we look at things that mentally ill people are doing. For example, like I said, that writing on the wall, or, things like this that I was writing, that if people, like, I had to keep it internal and have faith in myself and find that avenue for myself. But I think that even sometimes when I tried to say, oh, I want to apply for a PhD program, I think it seemed a little bit kooky, like, what are you doing? But I had this sort of internal sense of what I was doing and why I was going there, right? And so I think that just because I think sometimes things look a little bizarre, but it's sometimes it's just about guiding people towards the language that they need, guiding people towards the activities that could really suit them. And it's not because people are crazy or weird. And I think we need to stop definitely looking at mentally ill people's tendencies and desires and be like, oh, they're so scary and weird, and be like, maybe they need a certain type of language. I needed neuroscience to meet me where I was, and in the skill set and the sort of activities that I was doing. If somebody looked at my notes app that had nothing to do with neuroscience, they'd probably be like, girl, this girl is really let's stay away from her. But I think that, like, I kept it to myself, and then I read, and then I was like, oh, this really fits. And I think that everybody has a place where they could really fit. And it just I think that I always think that a therapist or a psychiatrist's job is not to tell people you're bad. I mean, obviously nobody's intending to do this, but I think it's like, nobody's broken. Nobody's sort of like, nobody needs to be corrected. I think people need to be guided towards the places where they make sense. And, sometimes people have illnesses that are going to be chronic, they're going to suffer that their entire lives. And it's not about, oh, I'm going to correct them, or, I mean, that can be useful, but I think that, but I think it's also useful to be like, I'm going to guide people towards somewhere that they're gonna fit. This was my undergraduate thesis. And I think guiding people towards where they fit can be just as healing. And I think I just needed to be guided to where I fit in this situation. And it was extremely healing for me and just productive and useful and really unlocked me in a way that I wanted to be unlocked. Also, I don't know, do I look like a neuroscientist? I would say yes, but I don't think that I thought I looked like a neuroscientist. I think because I am a conventionally attractive girl as well, and I'm grateful for the way that that's also eased my sense of marginalization in a lot of ways, or it's helped me out in life. But I'm gonna be honest, I actually had a jerky friend who I cut off, and she sent me a really mean message one time after we stopped talking, and basically the premise was that she thought I was stupid because I acted ditzy. I was like, I don't think I was trying to act ditzy. But then she was like kind of mad that I was like secretly smart. I was like, I was never trying to act stupid. I was just being myself. And it's like, I think that sometimes being a pretty young girl who's just, fun, whatever, or like, I know that sounds silly, but it's like, I think that nobody expects someone who looks like me to be smart, and nobody expects someone who looks like me to be good at something like science. I think people have a look connected to what they think smart looks like and what they think smart acts like, and I shouldn't be like fun, or I shouldn't be like pretty and stuff like that. Like, you get me? Like, I know it's a bit silly, but I was like, what made you think I was stupid? Like, I wasn't trying to act ditzy. I was just having fun with you as a friend. Like, what? That's weird. But anyways, yeah, really weird, strange, rude thing to say. Like, I think we had a lot of smart conversations, but I'm sorry you saw it that way. Sorry I'm smart. Also, I think she was bothered, but that was so manipulatively hiding that I was a smart person. Okay. Anyways, but yeah, I don't know. It's kind of weird, but I think that I don't think I ever saw myself and was like, I'm going to be a scientist. Like, I think I gravitated towards things that I thought girls who look like me would do, So stupid. I love Legally Blonde for that reason. Honestly, I love Legally Blonde so much, and just like, yeah, honestly, you can be feminine, you can be a very feminine person, wear pink, look cute, get your nails done, whatever, and still be at the top of your field. Like, who cares? What? That's weird. And yeah, just going more into the internalized misogyny, I don't think I thought I looked like a neuroscientist, so when I was writing this stuff, I was like, I'm crazy and weird, and like a girl who just, girls think they're smart, but they're not actually smart, and it's like, F no. Like, no. I'm a smart person. I'm just gonna say it also. I feel like, oh, I'm being full of myself. Like, no. Girls, like, we're smart. I'm extremely smart. I'm gonna say it for myself. I'm an extremely smart, intelligent woman. I'm so full of knowledge, and I'm so good at this, and I'm so good at doing what I'm doing right now. Yeah.